Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's video we have another news rumor video here to discuss. In today's we're looking at some signings from the past couple of days, some injury updates, a couple small pieces of news, and we have some trade rumors involving the Sabres, Maple Leafs, and Predators. We'll touch on all this coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey channel. Now before we begin this video, do not forget to like this video and subscribe down below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never be able to do this without all of you guys, so if you haven't already, don't forget to hit the subscribe button down below. Don't forget to leave a comment. We're on the road to 1,000 subscribers and try to hit 650 in the next couple of weeks. We're only about 10 subscribers away, so if you can, leave a subscribe down below. It really does help with the channel. On top of that, do not forget to stay tuned for more videos coming out in the very near future. If you guys haven't checked it out already, I made a buy me a coffee page. I'll leave a link to it down in the description below if you want to, and you can, which within your means. Leave a donation. It really does help with the channel. And on top of that, if you haven't already, check out my live stream that I did a couple weeks ago talking about all the stuff that happened on trade deadline day. So definitely don't forget to stay tuned for that. But in today's video, we have another news and rumor video here to discuss. So as per usual, we'll start off by looking at some signings. There were 8 signings. Most of these were ELCs that were being handed out. We'll touch on all these guys here. So first, the Toronto Maple Leafs have given Arttu Aitchenson a new contract. He's in the final year of his ELC. He's a 24-year-old goaltender. He's actually been doing pretty good over in the AHL, I think, this year. And Aitchenson gets a 3-year contract extension with an AAV of $900,000. Not a bad pickup here. If the Leafs do wind up moving off of a goaltender in the offseason with their Stolarz or Wool, I think Aitchenson could definitely be a pretty decent third stringer for the Maple Leafs. Not a bad pickup here. He was a 4th-round pick back in the 2020 draft. So far in the AHL level, has a .904 save percentage and 2.86 GAA in 32 games. Does not look that bad for the Toronto Maple Leafs AHL affiliate. So not a bad pickup here. 3 years, $900,000. If by the end of this contract he's like backup for the Toronto Maple Leafs, this is a really good pickup here for Toronto. So very interesting note there. But Aitchenson gets an extension in Toronto, and then we got a list of ELCs to talk about. So first, Ryan Bronson, who's a left shot defenseman, 21 years old, undrafted player, has signed a 3-year ELC with the Vegas Golden Knights with a $971,000. Now this one is for the start of next season, so very interesting note there. He's a really solid player and playing in the OHL, has 4 goals and 21 points in 58 games. So as a defenseman, it's not half bad. So I'm not sure if Bronson will ever amount to anything in the next couple of years. Might eventually be able to be like a third pair defenseman, but that's probably going to be a couple of years down the road. So not a bad pickup here from Vegas getting Bronson. However, he is a little more of a behemoth of a defenseman at 6'7", so very interesting note there. The Caps have officially signed Cole Hutson. Yes, Lane Hutson's brother has signed his ELC. Cole Hutson, who's a 19-year-old left shot defenseman, was a 2nd-round pick, 43rd overall in the 2024 draft by the Washington Capitals. Has signed a 3-year ELC with an AAV of $941,000. That'll begin for this year and then 2 more seasons after that. So it's backdated. So Cole Hutson will be able to get into some NHL games for the Washington Capitals towards the end of the regular season, which is really good news there. He's been playing over in the NCAA, has 10 goals and 32 points in 35 games as a defenseman. So that's really, really good numbers there for the Washington Capitals, new defenders. So I think this is really a pickup here. Once again, it's just an ELC. I do think Hutson has the potential to be a really solid top 4 defenseman for the Caps going forward. So very good news there. But Cole Hutson, brother of Lane Hutson, has signed his ELC in Washington and potentially make his NHL debut later today. Eddie Genberg, who's a left winger, 18 years old, was a 2nd rounder, 44th overall in just past year's draft. In the 2025 draft, has signed a 3-year ELC with the Red Wings with the AAV of $998,000. Now this one also will start at the beginning of next season, so not too surprising there. He's been playing over in the SHL, had 9 goals and 25 points in 43 games. Not terrible numbers for a player playing in the SHL, so really good stuff there. So I think eventually it could be like a bottom 6 forward, but once again it's going to be a couple of years down the road, so not a bad pickup here for Detroit. The Hawks have signed Sasha Boisvert, the 18th overall pick, 1st rounder in the 2024 draft. Sasha Boisvert, who's a center and who is 20 years old, has signed a 3-year ELC with the AAV of $974,000. That'll begin at the start of this season, so for the rest of this year and then the next 2 seasons. It's not a bad pickup here from the Blackhawks. Boisvert had 3 goals and 17 points in 26 games in the NCAA, so nothing to scoff at. Not one of the best point totals in the NCAA, but still didn't look terribly out of place. And now he's going to be joining the Blackhawks for the rest of the season, so really solid move move there from Chicago, and I really do like this addition here for the Hawks to finish out the season. Aitchenson, who was a first-round pick, 17th overall in last year's draft, the 2025 draft, is a left-shot defenseman, 19 years old, and got a 3-year ELC from the New York Islanders with an AAV of $1.08 million. And this one's also starting at the beginning of next year, so not too surprising there. He's been playing over in the OHL, where he has 28 goals and 70 points in 54 games. Aitchenson has a future of like a really solid top 4 defenseman. So good 3-year ELC. Probably won't play with the Islanders for this year, but next year potentially I could see it, or at the very least they'll play the AHL level, so really solid stuff there. Vinny Borghese, who's a right-shot defenseman, 22 years old, undrafted. He sends a 2-year ELC with the AAV of $988,000 with the Maple Leafs. Once again, starts at the beginning of next year. He had 5 goals and 20 points in 36 NCAA games. Eventually might be able to be like a third pair defenseman there for the Maple Leafs, so not a bad pickup here. And the Buffalo Sabres signed Gavin McCarthy, who's a right-shot defenseman, 20 years old. He's a 3rd-round pick, 86 overall in the 2023 draft. Gets a 3-year ELC with an AAV of $1.01 million. Once again, starting at the beginning of next year. He had 4 goals and 21 points in 36 SHL games, which isn't terrible. And I do think this is going to be a really solid pickup here for the Sabres. So, very interesting note there, but lots of very interesting signings from our past couple of days. Next, going over to a couple of injury updates. First up, we have the Anaheim Ducks. Troy Terry, who had missed about 2.5 weeks with an undisclosed injury, returned to game action on Sunday, and John Carlson, who had been out for over a month with a lower body injury, made his Ducks debut on Sunday. So 2 really big pieces for the Anaheim Ducks got back in the game action. Terry, a solid top 6 forward, and Carlson, recently acquired at the trade deadline, now a top 4 defenseman for the Anaheim Ducks. So that was a big boost there on Sunday. Jan Kuznetsov is out day-to-day with upper body injury for the Calgary Flames. I think he may have missed Monday's game. So very interesting note there. Hopefully it's nothing too serious, but at this point in time, he's only out day-to-day, so hopefully he's able to get back in the very near future. Erica Branson, who missed 3 games with an upper body injury, returned to game action on Tuesday. That is a big boost there for the Blue Jackets to get their solid stay-at-home 3rd pair defenseman back into the lineup. Apparently, according to some recent reports, Mikko Rantanen, who's been out with a lower body injury since the Olympics, will miss at least 10 to 14 more days. So that's a bad blow there for the Stars. They're hoping it was only going to be a couple of weeks, but now it's going to be a couple more weeks, and that could put him out until early April at the latest. So that's not great news there for the Dallas Stars. Well, when it comes to Rupe Hintz and Ryan Fox, who are both dealing with lower body injuries, they are both expected to be out longer term than Rantanen. So not great news there. It sounds like Fox is a little more serious than Hintz's is, but still, that's not great news there. So the Stars will be without 3 pretty decent everyday forwards for the next foreseeable future. So not great news there for Dallas. Leon Draisaitl, who was injured on Sunday with a lower body injury, has been ruled out for the rest of the regular season. This is a terrible blow for the Edmonton Oilers. They had a really good win there yesterday against San Jose without Draisaitl, so that's really good news there. But their schedule towards the end of the season is tough, and even though they are now 6 points up on the playoff bar, there's no guarantees that this team will end up making the playoffs. I personally do think they've built up a big enough lead. They probably will, but it will be very interesting. And as a Knights fan, I'll be very happy if the Oilers did miss the playoffs. But still, Draistal being out, that's a terrible blow for them. As much as McDavid does lead the team in points, I think Draisaitl is more of an impact player for that Oilers team than McDavid. So bad stuff there for the Oilers, and hopefully he's able to recover in the very near future. Adrian Kempe missed Monday's game with a lower body injury and is out day-to-day. Once again, it doesn't seem like it's anything too severe, but hopefully he's able to get back in the very near future. Kirby Dach left Sunday's game with upper body injury for the Montreal Canadiens and didn't return, and is now expected to be out at least 2 to 4 weeks. So that's a bad blow there. The tail end of that, he could be out for the rest of the regular season. So not great news there for the Habs as they lose one of their solid top 9 forwards. Joel Eriksson missed Tuesday's game and is out day-to-day with a lower body injury. Once again, hopefully it's nothing too serious. Eriksson is a really big piece of the Minnesota Wild's top 6, so hopefully it's nothing that's overly severe, but he did miss yesterday's game for the Minnesota Wild. Maxim Shabunov is out day-to-day with a lower body injury. I think he missed yesterday's game because of it, so hopefully it's nothing too severe, and Shabunov is able to get back in the very near future. So very interesting note there. Semyon Varlamov had 2 knee replacements, and that is the reason why he has not played an NHL game in the last 2 seasons. So not great news there. I'm not sure if he'll be able to get back in the game action this year, but that is the reason as to why we haven't seen Varlamov for quite a bit of time. Nick Jensen had surgery on a torn meniscus and is out at least 6 weeks. So that's a terrible blow. At the very least, he's probably going to be out if the Senators do make it for the most likely most of the first round, potentially even the start of the second round if Ottawa makes it that far. So that's a terrible blow. That could be season ending if the Senators miss the playoffs or get ousted early on. So that's a bad blow there for the Senators. As they're already missing Jake Sanderson, Blake Lizotte, who has an upper body injury, missed Monday's game and will be out a month. So that's a bad blow there for the Penguins to lose their 4th line center potentially for the rest of the regular season. While Brazeau, who have missed 4 games with undisclosed injury, returned to game action on Monday. So that was at least a big boost there. Brazeau's been a pretty decent middle 6 forward all season long. When it comes to the San Jose Sharks, Alex Wennberg missed Sunday's game with upper body injury and is out day to day. So not great news there. Igor Chernyshov lost Saturday's game with a concussion and did not return. There's no official timeline, I think, on his injury, but still, it did not look good. That was a really bad injury. And then Laurent Brossoit, who's had knee surgery a couple of years back, played his first NHL game on Sunday since April 2024. So that was a really big boost there for the Sharks. Yeah, playing a couple of AHL games, but first NHL game in a couple of years. Really good stuff there for Brossoit. And then Kevin Stenlund missed Monday's game with a lower body injury and is out day to day. Once again, doesn't seem like it's anything too serious, but Stenlund, who's a pretty decent bottom 6 forward, is out for the next couple of days. So very interesting note there, but some very interesting injury updates from our past couple of days. Here going over to some recalls, reassignments, and then some updates. When it comes to some recalls, Nolan Foote in Florida and Hunter Haight in Minnesota were both recalled. The Wild, like we said, we're dealing with the Joel Eriksson neck injury, so because of that, they called up Haight. Hopefully he does really well. And Nolan Foote was called up by Florida due to the fact that the Panthers have a couple of injuries going on with them right now. So not too surprising there, but Foote and Haight were recalled by their current clubs. When it comes to some reassignments, Michael Pizzata as well as Henry Thrum were both reassigned by the Toronto Maple Leafs. So that's not too surprising. It seems that the Leafs are getting a little bit healthier, so you don't need either of those guys at the NHL level. So they go back down to the AHL. So not too surprising there that Thrum and Pizzata were sent down. When it comes to a couple of quick updates here, Doug Armstrong has stepped down as Team Canada GM. So very interesting note there. He put together a pretty good team for the Olympics, but they came out just short in the gold medal game. So it seems like for the next few Olympics and World Cups, which we'll get to in a second, Team Canada is going to have a new GM. So we'll see who potentially could wind up being the new GM, but it has been announced that Doug Armstrong has stepped down as Team Canada GM. And we do have some updates when it comes to the 2028 World Cup of Hockey. They have announced the sort of format for that. So it's going to be taking place, I think it's in February. They're going to have 2 groups of 4 teams. I think every team's going to play each other once in the group stage. Then the 4th place teams in each division will be eliminated. 2 will play 3 in like a quarterfinal game, I guess it would be. And then the winners will go on to the semifinal games against the 1 seeds, and then the winners of those ones will go on to the final. The group stage matchups, and I think the 2v3 matchups when it comes to the playoffs, will be played in Prague and over in Czechia, as well as in Canada, in Calgary. And then the semifinal games and the final game will be played at Rogers Place in Edmonton. So very interesting note there. These are also going to have NHL rules. So if it goes to overtime in the finals or in the semifinals, it's 5v5, not 3v3 like it was in the Olympics. And that's going to happen not next year, but the year after, during the 27-28 season. So very interesting note there. There's been no announcements on what the 8 teams will be. You could probably expect Canada, Finland, Sweden, and the US. There's been some talk that Russia's a possibility, but not a guarantee by any means. And you'd expect guys like Czechia, I think, would be in the mix, Switzerland, Germany, and there's probably a couple of other teams too. So very interesting note there, but you're going to have 8 teams play the World Cup of Hockey in 2028. But that's the sort of format they're going to go with for the World Cup of Hockey. So very interesting note there. And lastly, here going over to a couple of trade rumors. So we got 3 trade rumors here to talk about today. One involving Buffalo, one involving Nashville, and one involving the Toronto Maple Leafs. So starts the Buffalo Sabres. Recently, I think it was on an article or a video call he was doing or something like that, Dave Pagnotta mentioned that the Buffalo Sabres were shopping Devin Levi towards the trade deadline, and he says that he expects talks to continue on into the summer. So the Buffalo Sabres goaltending situation is very, very interesting. A couple of years ago, they signed Levi from the NCAA. He was looking like a really solid goaltender, I think 2 or 3 years ago, when they just missed out to Florida for the last playoff spot, and he looked really, really good. But since then, he's basically been at the AHL level, looked pretty good at the AHL level too, but now he's starting to become a goaltender who might not be able to crack the Sabres goaltending lineup. Like right now, Lyon, he's only signed for next year, but he has been phenomenal. I think he now has the longest winning streak of goaltenders in Sabres history. And Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, they signed him to a long-term deal, and he's actually been producing pretty well this year. So with those two there, and now Colton Ellis, who they acquired off waivers at the beginning of the season as their third stringer, who they have a lot of faith in, who I think after Lyon's contract ends could eventually be the backup. You're not having anywhere for Levi to play except for the AHL, and he's waivers eligible next year. So if they do want to run with another Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, Colton Ellis tandem, or Alex Lyon tandem next year, and they don't really see a future with Devin Levi, then there's a possibility for a Devin Levi trade in the offseason. So that's very interesting. I do think there could be a couple of teams who have some interest. I think Edmonton would have some interest. I think the Canes could potentially have some interest. I think the Flyers would definitely have some interest. I personally wonder about the Blue Jackets. Could that team have some interest? I wonder about Ottawa. I wonder about Montreal. There's a couple of teams out there who could use at the very least a tandem goaltender, if not a starter. And I think Levi, with the numbers he's shown at the AHL level, is pretty much ready for the NHL. So this is going to be an interesting situation to watch out for because of the depth that the Sabres have in net. I think there's a possibility and a very good likelihood we could see a Levi trade or a goalie trade just in general for the Buffalo Sabres, because I don't think they're going to go into next season with 4 goaltenders on their roster who can play at the NHL level and potentially losing one of them on waivers. So I definitely do think there's a very likely chance we could see Levi get dealt. And I think there'd be a couple of teams who would be lining up out the door. And once again, goaltenders don't have the greatest of values, so I could see the Sabres maybe get like a second round pick and a decent prospect for him, but I don't think they're going to get a whole bunch. So very interesting note there, but keep your eye on Buffalo Sabres in the offseason once their season comes to an end, as they could look to try and trade Devin Levi at some point, so very interesting note there. Next, going over to Frank Seravalli. He was talking about Jonathan Marchessault, and he mentions that Marchessault wanted out of Nashville for over a calendar year now. So I think Marchessault's not liking that contract he signed with the Predators. It was not last offseason, but the offseason prior. He left Vegas to go with Nashville, hoping to be a solution there, and since he's arrived in Nashville, Preds have been a bottom-ranked team. At this current point in time, they're only 2 points back of a playoff spot, but still, like, it does not look like Marchessault's really working well in Nashville. So it seemed like they tried to trade him just before a trade deadline and never came to fruition. So this is going to be a situation I think we have to watch out for in the offseason. If Marchessault really does want out of Nashville that bad, I think there's a very likely chance we could see a trade at some point in the offseason. If Nashville makes the playoffs, maybe he changes his mind, but it seems like he has his heart set on leaving Nashville at some point. He does have trade protection. I think he has no movement clause. He's got this year plus 3 more seasons at $5.5 million AAV. I'm not sure if there's a whole bunch of teams out there who would like to take on that contract with Marchessault becoming an aging veteran. He's still a really good point producer, but when it gets to 2 years from now, when he's got 1 year left on that $5.5 million cap, he probably won't be as productive. So it's going to be a very interesting situation to watch out for. I do think that given the fact he really wants out of there, Marchessault will get traded this offseason, but it's going to be an interesting situation to watch out for because he does have some control over where he goes with his no movement clause, and it does sound like he wants to go to a no tax state. So you're looking at teams like Vegas, Seattle, Dallas, Carolina, those sorts of teams. So very interesting note there, but we're going to have to keep our eye on Jonathan Marchessault going forward as potentially a trade chip for the Nashville Predators. And lastly, going over to both Chris Johnston and David Pagnotta. They both mentioned this on separate occasions, and they both mentioned that the Maple Leafs were 100% listening and potentially working on a deal involving Matthew Knies. Now that is shocking to me. I did hear some rumblings about maybe the Habs trying to acquire Matthew Knies before a trade deadline, but yeah, that would be shocking if Knies was going to be dealt. He just signed a longer term, I think it was like a 6 or 7 year deal, just over $7 million, which is, in my opinion, really good value for him. And the Leafs need more younger players like that. So the fact that they were even considering moving Matthew Knies is shocking to me. He's a really solid top 6 forward. He's part of the new core 4, I guess you could say, with guys like Matthews, Nylander, and Tavares. So not too surprising there. But like potentially moving him when you need to get younger, not older, is surprising. Knies, I don't know what they would have wanted in a trade package. Like, I'm thinking a first-round pick, a solid roster player, maybe a pretty good prospect. Like, I think it would have taken a haul to take Matthew Knies out of Toronto. I don't think this is something that gets revisited in the offseason. I think they tinker with other things. I do not believe they trade Matthew Knies. I think they'll be quite foolish to deal Matthew Knies because he is a really big piece of that solution going forward for the Toronto Maple Leafs. But the fact that they were at least considering moving Knies before the trade deadline, that just really does shock me. I would have been very surprised if we saw that come trade deadline day. So very interesting note there. I guess it could be a situation we have to watch out for in the offseason if there's a team that ponies up a big enough asking price. But yeah, I have heard Matthew Knies' name after the trade deadline quite a bit as a guy who could potentially get dealt. So I'm not sure if this means that he'll get dealt in the offseason, but I think that team will be very foolish if they were to trade a solid top 6 young sort of player for the foreseeable future. So very interesting note there, but I personally do think Matthew Knies is probably going to stay in Toronto, even though they did explore moving him. So definitely, have your thoughts on all of this down in the comment section below. Do the Maple Leafs move Matthew Knies in the offseason? Can Marchessault get out of Nashville in the offseason? And do the Buffalo Sabres consider a Devin Levi trade? Definitely, I would love to hear your guys' thoughts on all of that, plus all the other news and updates, the injuries, the signings, all that stuff. That's all I'm going to talk about for today. Remember to like this video, and if you like, remember to subscribe below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never be able to do this with all of you guys, so if you haven't already, don't forget to hit the subscribe button down below. Don't forget to leave a comment. We're on the road to 1,000 subscribers. Don't forget to stay tuned for more videos coming out in the very near future. I also do a buy me a coffee page if you can, and it's within your means. Leave a donation. It really does help with the channel. I also do a blog talking about news, rumors, analysis, stuff like that, so check that out. I'll link to that in the description below. I can't wait to see you guys all for the next video. See you guys soon.